Welcome to Transform Now, the podcast brought to you by SS&C Blue Prism. Enterprise AI isn't just a tool, it's the heartbeat of smart organizations like yours, helping to reinvent work to deliver higher growth, more customers, and better experiences. Join us as we discover how AI-powered work orchestration and automation is making things better for everyone: customers, employees, shareholders, and most importantly, you. Let's get into the show.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Transform Now. I'm Brad Hairston. Today, I have two guests on the show from our delivery partner, Virtual Blue, which is based in New Zealand. Joining me are Sharyn Catt, Managing Director, and Peter Catt, Director of Quantum and AI. Well, welcome, Sharyn and Peter. Why don't you guys introduce yourselves a little bit? Sharyn, let's start with you.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Sharyn. I've been working with Blue Prism, I guess, since about 2017 when it really first came to New Zealand. And my background before that was project management, continuous improvement across banking and telecommunications. So I've done a bunch of things across my career. And this was really just a good flow on from that whole continuous improvement kind of process mapping, then to look how you automate processes. So it's a little bit about me.
Nice. Okay. Peter?
Well, I'm Peter Catt. Welcome from New Zealand. My background earlier in my career was supply chain management across various industries, pharmaceuticals, right through to timber processing. Of course, it's a smaller economy here in New Zealand, so people tend to move between industries. That's normal. Then I went off and did a doctorate in applied computer science, really focusing on predictive modeling, forecasting, optimization of forecasting models for both cost optimization and customer service level. Ended up buying an SAP practice and ultimately selling that through to Accenture with about 230 staff. So I did about 12, 15 years in the SAP world, and that was good enterprise systems. But following that in 2017, that led me into the world of IBM Watson. We subsequently started doing avatars with a local company called Replica that we started. And then a couple of years ago, we merged three companies: Spacetime, which was natural language processing; Replica, which was the avatars, with Virtual Blue under Sharyn's leadership. So all three came together because we had common customers anyway. And of course, billing from different companies to the one customer didn't make sense. And we consolidated that type of admin overhead, the accounting overhead, by merging the three businesses. A lot of synergy, of course, across RPA, intelligent avatars, and natural language processing, which has now come a long way with Gen AI.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, Sharyn, why don't you tell us a little bit more about Virtual Blue? What inspired you and Peter to start the company, and how do you differentiate in the market?
Okay. So I founded Virtual Blue back in 2018. So we've been around for about 7 years now. And it really was, there was an opportunity in the market when Blue Prism went from selling licenses as bundles to single licenses. We were delivering Blue Prism to large enterprise customers in New Zealand. And it was at that time, with that opportunity to sell single licenses, where I saw an opportunity in the market to take it to that next level down of customer and take it to a wider market. So, and that's really what we did. We started off in the healthcare industry and really just grew from there. The great thing about healthcare in New Zealand is, and because we're such a small country, is that everyone kind of knows everyone. So we've got a really good referral base going from the work we would do for one customer. They'd then speak to someone else about what they'd done, and they'd be like, oh, we want it too. So that was a really great start for us.
Mm-hmm.
I guess what sets us apart from others is, as you heard from Peter's background and my background and a couple of the others in our management team, we all look at this from a business focus when we're going out to customers and looking and understanding what the problems are that they're trying to solve. And then we take that and then look at what technology we could use to apply across it to solve their problems. So, and the other great thing is, because we've now got into building our own products to work alongside our digital workers, it means that we're able to tailor our products and solutions to meet our customers' demands specifically to what they need. and probably more to what the New Zealand market needs and even the Australian market in some cases.
Right. So you do serve customers in Australia. Do you guys have any plans to scale more regionally, like across APAC or even globally?
Yes, global domination. Be amazing. Thanks. Yes, we're definitely got a plan to grow and continue our launch, I guess, into Australia, and then see where it takes us from there, either in other APAC areas into the Asian market or further abroad.
Yeah.
Just on that, a couple of years ago, we sent an MBA team up to Singapore.
Mm-hmm.
They did quite a few interviews of CEOs in the healthcare space up there on our behalf. And really the essence of it was, is an avatar acceptable to that population to make complex medical bookings like radiology? And we did quite a bit of that in Australia. Got about 90 clinics in Australia that are doing that. And the answer was yes, they were very receptive to it. So, you know, we've done a little bit of work in Singapore because Singapore's easy to do business with, of course. And you've got a lot of expat Brits, and we're basically Brits down here. You know, it's an easy cultural environment to work in. So that's a possibility, but there's a lot of mid-market opportunities still. We're well away from saturation across Australia and New Zealand for this type of technology.
Right.
And, you know, it's become so cost effective now, and the return on investment so obvious for automation. So, yeah, we've locked it up.
So Peter, with all your work in healthcare in particular, where do you see the biggest opportunities for automation and digital transformation in your neck of the woods? What are those recurring opportunities that you're able to go and solve for your customers? I would love to hear what the trends are from your perspective.
Well, one of the major trends, of course, was ChatGPT, and that's changed the conversation around automation and AI, of course. But, you know, when we were IBM Watson partners, you know, 2017 for probably about 4 years, you know, you'd start talking to people about natural language processing or AI, and the eyes would roll back, and, you know, they weren't particularly interested. Now everyone has an opinion on AI. Right or wrong, it doesn't matter. It's a conversation starter, and because of the accessibility of large language models and Gen AI. So that's a good thing. I think that's a good thing, and I think it also positively impacts RPA and automation, and obviously combined intelligent automation. So the conversation is easy to start and progress into ultimately into a proof of concept or a deliverable of sorts. So I think the time's right. I think that, you know, the basic trend is there's high awareness of the capability of these technologies. You know, there are some overestimation and underestimation depending on what we're talking to, but at least it's pretty easy to engage people now. And particularly in the mid-market, what we would call the mid-market for us is a different beast to what it would be in the US, for instance. Mid-market for us is, you know, 20 million turnover right through to maybe 500 million. So relatively small in comparison, but still a sweet spot for us because those players aren't likely to in-house intelligent automation. So they'll go out into markets. As Sharyn said, we're very referenceable, which is really where the rubber meets the road. You know, you can do all the demo where you like, info sheets, what have you. But ultimately, prospects want to talk to existing customers and understand that customer experience and you know, how we relate to customers. So that's really useful. But I think, you know, in a nutshell, the large language models and Gen AI have triggered such an awareness, and that's the current trend that you know is serving us well.
Yeah. And what use cases do you see customers wanting to solve that where LLMs come in the most?
Of course, you know, for want of a better term, RPA is fairly deterministic. It's process driven, and it's fairly locked down, whereas AI is probabilistic depending on the flavor of AI. There's a lot of flavors of AI apart from Gen AI. So I'll just put that out there.
Yeah.
So what we're typically doing is, say if we're doing a medical referral form extraction, we're doing a first pass OCR. So the robot will hand that to our Agentic AI, which is called Angelica. And Angelica will pull out the desired fields, but we also use a typical author-critic flow within the large language model. So a couple of lessons that we've learned: if you've got big prompts, the accuracy tends to drop and you're more susceptible to hallucination. So if you've got a multi-step process where you've got very, very small specific prompts, and you're also getting it to critique its own prompts as a second or tertiary pass, the accuracy gets very high. The other thing we do is couple that with business rules for validation. So large language models have their weaknesses, but they're still incredibly powerful technologies. And if you can put the guardrails around it and you've got a good agentic flow, then you'll get very high accuracy. If you're just putting in a large prompt willy-nilly, no, you're just not going to hit the numbers, particularly in a healthcare setting where it's critical. So that's the type of thing we're doing. Document extraction. We're doing a lot of front end, taking complex radiology bookings. That's more deterministic because it leads into a flow depending on the modality. If you've selected MRI and that's the treatment you need, the imaging you need, then it will ask you the questions that relate to MRI. So it has that type of typical process flow and branching depending on the customer response. So we're doing a lot of that, but the bulk of the work is still in probably finance and accounting. And they're the type of mundane processes which are necessary. They're high volume, security audit around them. And that's really the bread and butter. Not type of super interesting, but super critical to the business in as much as it's a really clear return on investment, automating those back-end processes. And as I say, that's our bread and butter, but we do some interesting stuff with Gen AI around that.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Sharyn, what about from your perspective, when you think about how your clients have evolved as Gen AI has emerged and become yet another intelligent skill that can be connected to the digital workers? Where do you see the most movement in your customer base around leveraging Gen AI?
So a number of our customers have been using OCR for years now alongside their digital workers, but with the introduction of large language models over the last, let's say, year, where we can actually apply it, we're starting to see increased accuracy because, as Peter mentioned before, you've got OCR extracting it, but then you're passing it through the language model, which is then increasing, the information that you're passing back to the digital worker. This has allowed us to increase the accuracy and the confidence levels of the data, but also allowing us to do more, trickier stuff that they wouldn't have necessarily passed to the robots in the first place because it's too challenging for the technology at that time. So that's really great for us. So we've got customers who are looking at, in particular, extracting referrals and loading them into their business system. They're looking at going from saying 20 to 40% of total referrals that they can load to up to 80%. So it's just by applying this different technology. I guess another space as well is if you think about the good old chatbots, they had limited abilities. So you could ask it set questions and you may or may not get the answer you want because it had been trained to only say specific things. So with the introduction of large language models, again, these are coming a long way. So it's not as scripted. You're able to ask more open-ended questions. And as long as it's got the guardrails and the data that you are sourcing from is accurate, it's able to give you a lot better responses than the typical old school chatbot, which is good because they had a bit of a bad name, I think. Everyone we talk to about chatbots, they're like, my experience so far hasn't been great. So
We've gotten a lot smarter in those years, no doubt about it.
Yeah.
Aaron, I'm assuming that you guys have some customers that haven't yet leveraged Gen AI and they're reluctant because of risk mitigation, compliance, security, data privacy. How have you and Peter been able to influence them, to, kind of move in this direction where many companies are, but not all companies are going?
Yeah, it's a good question. So we've got people in the business who see and understand the technology, and then they're using us to help write strategy papers to be able to take to the board to explain, I guess, what these technologies are about, the risks that we would see, or how you would mitigate those risks, and just to give them just better general knowledge around what these technologies can do and the possibilities.
There's a few misnomers around what's happening with your data. Of course, if you're calling APIs, you can generally opt out. So your data doesn't end up in their training repository. And I think that's quite important. If you're just using, Chat, Claude, Grok, whatever you may be using through the UI, that's a different story. You're basically, signing it all away in many cases.
Right.
But if you say using the Azure platform, which is what we tend to use, so we're now Microsoft partners, we're opting out of any data submission. So that's important.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, now that Microsoft have a data center in West Auckland, we've got data sovereignty, which is, of course, that's a concern for some people, depending on the use case. Whereas historically, we'd used the Sydney, the Australia East data center, Azure data center. So from Microsoft's point of view, there's a lot that just within the Azure stack and that platform that mitigates some of those concerns.
Sure. Right. So Peter, you mentioned a second ago about the deterministic nature of RPA agents, if you will. There's a lot of task-based agents in play right now. With Agentic, all the hype right now is around these agents becoming more autonomous, more self-driven. From your perspective, is the hype real? Are your customers ready for it? Or is it a lot of talk, but very little action at this point? What do you see happening?
Well, it's a $64,000 question, isn't it, Brad? I think it's real, but like anything, there needs to be a level of maturity before it's enterprise grade. You just need to be aware of what you're signing up to. I believe today it will be a game changer, and there'll be a lot of SaaS software and probably enterprise software which will be seriously challenged by it.
Yeah,
certainly over the next 5 years. Not today, not next month, but it will come. And I think when you're in a situation where there are so many agents that are doing, very finite tasks, and they're well orchestrated, then that will become quite disruptive. And it really is a different view of your system of record and how you're transacting right through that value chain. I really do think it will be a game changer. But of course, I don't have any more insight than anyone else that's close to this, but I don't think it's imminent, but I think it's happening. It's not the type of thing in New Zealand that customers are talking about now. They know that the landscape's changing very quickly. In fact, we had a pre-sales call yesterday, and the customer was saying, okay, if we sign up to using Blue Prism and Angelica AI, what happens in a year's time if the better technology has come along? Well, frankly, that's like buying a new PC or laptop. You know that it's going to be out of date in 6 months. It's just, you need to commit, otherwise you navel gaze forever. But the other thing is, my actual response to him wasn't the PC analogy. It was, we're exposed to this technology every day, and we can't afford, as a small business, we can't afford to fall behind. So when we think something's mature enough to take to market and it's enterprise ready, then we'll incorporate that into our roadmap and ultimately some stack, and it's offered to customers. So it's not that we're going to sit on our hands and become a dinosaur ourselves in a year, but it is an incredible rate of change. I've never seen anything like this in decades of tech. It's exciting, but I said to someone recently, I'd spend 2 days a week just reading and doing research, and that's not an exaggeration. You need to read a lot to keep on top of this, and then you work out what's real and what isn't, what's hype. But I think it'll be disruptive, but you just need to keep an eye on it.
Yeah. Well, one other technology trend, not moving quite as fast, but one that I absolutely have to ask you about, since you're the head of quantum computing and AI, do you agree with those who say quantum will finally be mainstream by the end of this decade, or
Yeah.
is it further out? And the second part to that is, when it finally is here, what do you expect to be the impact on automation and AI?
Well, there's a couple of components to the first question. The first is, this is all about stability and decoherence, right? It's about getting qubits which are stable. And that's why they're refrigerated. You're trying to take away environmental noise, heat,
Right.
and to keep those systems stable. But there is a company, I think they're actually headquartered in the US now, but their operations, their manufacturing operations are around Canada. And they're called D-Wave. Now, about 2009, D-Wave put out a commercial processor. I think it was worth about 10 million US at the time.
Yeah.
And what it can do is something called quantum annealing. And quantum annealing is really good for optimization problems like the traveling salesman or salesperson problem, optimizing a large workforce, those type of logistics style problems, potentially truck deliveries, that type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And even optimization is applied to, financial portfolio management. It's got many really valuable use cases.
Yeah.
Now, we're talking 15, 16 years ago that first came out. Now, that's just one flavor of quantum. I accept that. It is not true generalized quantum computing.
Mm-hmm.
There's a number of avenues that are being pursued in terms of technology. There's the type of cryogenic. There's photonic, there's a number, there's probably half a dozen, realistic avenues. And I say realistic, they've got potential. I would imagine that, by the end of the decade, there'll be some serious progress. There are big financial commitments to it.
Mm-hmm.
There's also a lot of uncertainty. The problems are pretty well understood.
Yeah.
The solutions, not so much. If and when it does come, and I believe it will, there's a lot of doubting promises around this, I must admit. There's a lot of critics.
Certainly are.
But the type of thing you can do, because you can look at such a huge data set, basically simultaneously, it's in superposition.
Mm-hmm.
Then you can do things like, medicines which are customized to an individual. You can do that type of thing. You can do massive work around materials management and discovery. You can also do, or potentially, and this is potentially, the algorithms are yet to be developed. There's work going into it, but it's in its infancy, is quantum machine learning, which means that, a machine learning system can just have, so many features applied to determine a predictive outcome.
Right.
And if the technology succeeds, then absolutely, and of course, then you've got security and cryptography and you've got those issues. But if the technology succeeds, it will be an absolute game changer. Now, it's probably best to view it as it doesn't replace classical computing. It augments it. Yeah. And the hybrid approaches are probably the realistic approaches.
Mm-hmm.
Your CPU, GPU combinations, they can do some wonderful stuff and always will be able to do that, conceptually. And quantum doesn't necessarily replace that. It sits in some other fields that will be, really upended by the technology. So it's very positive, apart from the fact that everything you've currently got encrypted could well be broken.
Yeah. Yeah. Aside from that, that's just a minor byproduct. Right.
That's right.
Well, you've brought up Angelica AI a few times, and I definitely want you to describe it. Before we do that, though, Sharyn, one thing I love to do when I have delivery partners on is hear a compelling customer story that brings some of these things together, and something you guys are really proud of. Do you have one that you could share just as an example of some of the great work that you guys are doing in your market?
Yeah, sure. So this is a healthcare customer, and we started out by automating a imaging request process. And so with that, we're using a digital worker, a smart form, so people are able to enter their requests and send it straight to the digital worker. And then we're also using OCR to look for patient consents and making sure that signatures are attached to their account so the image request can be sent through. So that was one of the first things we did with them. And another product we then built for them was a online booking solution. So their patients are able to book any time of the day and through their website, and they're able to go through and make a complex radiology booking and have it booked real time without even having to contact someone in the contact center. The great thing about that is we're using an avatar. So they are having someone speak to them and taking them through the guided process. So they're able to understand, also read, but also have it spoken to them about what's next required from them to enter in to the system. And I think that's done really well. And the great things that I've loved seeing from that is the time of day that people are actually using it. So, the traditional contact center is open from 8 till 5 or 8 till 6, where you've got people who are working during that time who can't get to the phone. So they're coming home from any time from 6 p.m., 3 a.m. in the morning. They're making bookings at a time that's suitable for them. So they're able to get their health requests dealt with, I guess, which is fantastic to see.
Yeah.
And we've rolled that out now over 90 clinics across Australia and New Zealand for them. And now we're continuing to do great new stuff for it and looking at how we can grow that product. And again, with how we'll be able to utilize large language models and incorporate that into the patient journey to make that easier for them to do that process, but then continuing on with billing processes and automating those. And so it's great to see the opportunities that they're seeing within the business to be able to apply this technology as well.
Yeah, that's great. Nice to see how you started in one area and it just continued to expand into so many others. So clearly they were impressed with the returns they were getting from your work and from automation and AI and from an avatar. And you mentioned an avatar several times, and that leads me to Angelica AI. So Peter, talk about what Angelica AI is, how you guys have basically kind of productized it and how you're offering it to the market. Would love to hear more about that.
So, we had early access to an open AI model about 3.5 years ago. And the use case was elder care. So the intention was to use an avatar that could front with a large language model, really for people that are not only lonely, but they might be suffering some cognitive decline, Alzheimer's potentially. And for some of those people, they can be asking the same question over and over. Now, of course, an AI is indifferent to that. That doesn't irritate an AI. So to have some personal information like the names of family, friends, activities that could be taking place in the facility, and even things like general questions, Q&A type thing, general knowledge, news, time of day, typical type of personal assistant, virtual assistant type stuff. So that was the intention. So we did have early access to an open AI model, which was very good of them for the specific research. Now, unfortunately, that didn't go anywhere. The partner company that we were working with, they had some privacy concerns that we couldn't get past. And that is what it is. That's fine. But it became obvious to us that large language models, or Gen AI, were going to have a big impact on the world. Now, even at the time, we didn't know, this was prior to ChatGPT being released to the public. We didn't know, the size of it. And it was massive. The adoption was massive. And it's unsurprising. It's a really useful tool. As I've said earlier, it does have faults. You need to be aware of them. But if you know your subject and it's returning something, you know immediately whether that's valid or not. And of course, if you're using it in creative ways, it doesn't really matter at that point if some of it's not accurate. So there's certainly really good use cases for it.
Right.
Anyway, we saw the potential to use this to couple it with RPA and do some things, as Sharyn said, that are tricky, that RPA can't really handle. And that's okay. They're definitely complementary technologies. And intelligent automation is exactly that. It's the robot plus AI. So we thought we're going to build it ourselves. There's always a lot of talk around what people are doing, but let's get into it and commit. So the team started putting together a design document for this, and we got a graduate in, and he made a big contribution to that. Subsequently employed him, by the way, so that was a good outcome. Computer science grad. So we started putting Angelica together. Now, Angelica can do a lot of things. There's front end, customer facing, that can use an avatar, or it can be text, it could be phone, it could be email, right? So it's multi-channel.
Okay.
Not everyone wants an avatar. It doesn't align with their brand or with the use case.
Yeah.
No problem. We can expose the technology in different ways. And then there's the back end. You might have someone in a Microsoft Teams environment and they want to be doing document search. So it can do that type of thing.
Right.
And by the way, the estimates are that we all spend about 500 hours a year just searching for stuff. It certainly feels that way to me. So maybe that's accurate. And then we've got, in terms of your system of record or your various systems, whether it's CRM, ERP, knowledge bases, databases of different flavors, we can either integrate with RPA or APIs, depending on what's available, what's fit for purpose. So we've got that. But coming back to the actual stack and what Angelica does, apart from those audiences, that could be a robot, the audience could be an internal team, or it could be customers. It's really a hybrid model. So we've got the OpenAI model sitting in Azure. We've got business rules that we agree with the company to, with the customer to provide guardrails. We've got a number of very, precision models like the OCR model, which is useful. And we've also got some predictive analytics, depending on the use case, if they want to do anything around, potentially customer churn or sales forecasting, that type of thing. So it's very much a hybrid, and we pick and choose the right technologies for that particular use case. So essentially it's not out of the box. We will meet with a customer or a customer intimate. We'll do some, design work with them, understand what problems they want to solve, and then we'll configure the solution accordingly. So it's very broad in its application, but it's really got us into the thick of what the leading technology can do and what it can't do, which is, pretty important as well to understand the limitations. So that's type of the background of Angelica, but we're rolling it out pretty quickly now because it's just so useful to couple it with RPA.
And the market response has been pretty good thus far.
Fantastic. Yeah. I mean, people are excited about this, and of course, there's probably a little bit of pressure on certain executive teams to adopt this type of technology as well.
Yeah.
Which is, in many respects, is type of secondary. You always want to start with the business problem, right? And then what's an appropriate technology to solve it?
Right. You could probably increase the reception to it by making the avatars AI dolls of the people at the company. This is like a trend now. People are Barbie dolls of themselves. It's crazy.
We had digitized the customer. That was their trick.
You tried that. Okay.
And funnily enough, that was in the replica company before it merged with Virtual Blue. So that was just after our first COVID lockdown. We had lockdowns here. So
yeah.
And so they were keen to have that online presence if they couldn't make it into store.
Yeah. Well, Peter and Sharyn, it's been a real pleasure talking with both of you. Thank you so much for joining the podcast. We are very glad to have you guys as a key delivery partner over on your side of the world, I'll say. And hopefully we'll see you doing work over here in this neck of the woods before too long. But thank you for what you do and the great work, and really appreciate you sharing some stories and talking about avatars and quantum and all these things that are all going on at the same time. It's good stuff, and really enjoyed the time. So thank you, and I wish you both the very best.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brad. Thanks very much for your time, and thanks for listening, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Transform Now, the podcast from SS&C Blue Prism. You can find all of our episodes on your favorite podcast channel, as well as YouTube. To stay on top of the hottest topics in the world of enterprise AI, subscribe now. The future of work is here.